Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Honda Ridgeline, we're going to be showing you how to install the Redarc Tow Pro Liberty Trailer Brake Controller. But before we get into that, let's take a minute. We'll check this out and make sure it's going to be the right setup for you. So with these Ridgelines, they're awesome vehicles. You know, I'm a fan of them. Hondas are notoriously reliable and good work vehicles. You know, you can get the job done with them. And because of that, you know, people tend to pull some larger trailers around with these vehicles. And if that trailer happens to have brakes on it, you're going to need a way to apply the trailer brakes. That way you're not just relying on the Ridgeline to do all the stopping. And that's where a trailer brake controller like our Liberty is going to come into play. There are a ton of different trailer brake controllers out there on the market, and the Redarc is hands down one of my favorites. I've got a lot of experience with them. And they just work like you'd expect them to. But one of the main things that's going to separate this brake controller from a lot of the other ones is the appearance. They almost look factory to me. So the main body, if you will, of the brake controller, you can hide that up underneath the dash, and the only thing you're going to be able to see is the control knob. So you're not going to have to deal with, you know, a more traditional type brake controller. It's what I call them, like this one here, that's going to mount on the dash, be completely visible, and take up some space. You know, there's nothing wrong with these at all. They work and everything, but especially in a vehicle like the Ridgeline, it's not a full-size, huge pickup truck, right? So the inside is a little on the smaller side. So having something like this on the dash could get annoying pretty quick. And with the Redarc, it's just something you're not going to have to deal with. I personally think that the Liberty is a great matchup for the Ridgeline and what it's going to be able to do. Redarc makes another one that's very similar. It's called the Tow Pro Elite. With that one, there's some more features and can do a couple more things, but honestly, I think it's a little overkill for the Ridgeline and how most people are going to be using this type of vehicle. So with the Liberty, like we have here today, this is going to be good for trailers that have up to 2 axles, and it's going to work for trailers that have electric brakes, so that'll be the vast majority of them out there. But it can also work with electric over hydraulic if you happen to have an odd setup with that type of braking system. This will work with those as well. This is going to be a proportional type brake controller, which is a good thing. That's what I recommend pretty much all the time, unless you're in a special circumstance or something along those lines. But what that proportional term means is the trailer's braking pressure is going to match that of the Ridgeline, more or less. So, you know, the harder that your vehicle is decelerating, the harder the trailer will brake. And that's just going to make for a more predictable and comfortable stop. Now, with that in mind, you can make some adjustments here, and that's exactly what this knob is for. There's going to be some numbers on it, 0 to 10, and that's going to allow you to kind of fine-tune everything as far as the braking force is concerned. As far as the adjustment goes, a good rule of thumb is usually to start somewhere in the middle, you know, maybe you're 4 or 5 or something. But, you know, you're able to adjust this on the fly more or less to suit your varying needs. So, for example, if you have a trailer that's unloaded, say regular utility trailer or something, pretty light, you probably don't need a whole lot of help, you know, braking force going on. So you might be able to get away with a 2 or a 3, something like that. But you get to where you're going, you load it up, you got a bunch of weight on there. Notice that the trailer could brake harder. You know, maybe you're standing harder on the pedal here in the Honda and it's just not slowing down as quick as you'd like. You can dial that up to 6 or 7 or anywhere in between there. So yeah, you can fine tune to your particular load, and it's kind of nice too. You know, like I said, if you have an empty trailer, you don't need to be maxed out, because then you're just putting unnecessary wear and tear on your trailer's brakes, right? And this also, it's pretty cool. It has what's called a park brake feature. So let's say if you're just sitting at a stoplight, you know, you don't need a whole lot of extra help, right? Usually just the Honda's brakes can stop everything from rolling. The brake controller will recognize that and, you know, change everything in an intelligent way to minimize additional wear and tear on your trailer's components. So you'll get some more life out of them more than likely. And this knob is also how you're going to apply the manual override. So with the manual override, you push down on the button and it's going to send power back just to the trailer's brake. So you'd use that in the event of a sway type situation where the trailer kind of starts to get away from you a little bit. You can hit this, and if you can feather the power up, even better, but that'll slow the trailer down, get it straight again, and get things back under control. And the LED too, how that's going to work, whenever you hit the brake, you get kind of a visual here on what's going on. So the lighter the braking force, the lighter the light is. There's kind of a purple there. And then say if I ramp it up to 10 and hit the brake, it's going to be more red. So you have a visual indicator as well. You can kind of see out of the corner of your eye and check on what's actually happening. As far as trying to figure out the stuff that you're going to need to get a brake controller like this installed, it's really just going to depend on your vehicle. With that said, the vast majority of these Ridgelines that I've seen at least are going to be set up like ours, but we'll still talk about how you can check and figure all that stuff out. So the very first thing that you'd want to do is look at the back of your truck, and if you have a factory installed 7-way like we do here, then you'd want to look underneath the dash for the factory trailer brake connector plug. That factory connector plug will be located kind of right here in this area. You can see it from up underneath the dash, and we'll show you that during the installation. So if you have that, you have a couple different ways of doing this. There's the Liberty that's available that comes included with the universal connector plug. And if you happen to have the brake controller harness that a lot of these come with from Honda, you could use that just fine. You just have to plug this into the factory connector plug. This would plug into the brake controller, and then use butt connectors to connect all these wires. But that's not my ideal method per se. Just a little extra work, but will work just fine. And I'll even tell you what colors go where and everything during the installation if you end up going this route. What I would recommend doing is getting the Liberty that doesn't come included at all with that wireless connector, and then picking up this. This is made by Redarc. It's a custom fit connector for your Honda. So this end would plug into the brake controller. This end would plug into that factory connector. So it just eliminates having to use butt connectors and stuff. All plug and play, makes the installation a little more simple, and eliminates making an error or something like that. This is what we used, worked out great. If you end up checking for those components that we just talked about and you don't have them, for sure you would at the very least need a 7-way round connector at the back. And it's hard to speak for every single one of these vehicles, right? Because they're just kind of all over the place with every manufacturer across the board, kind of just depending on what options it came with and everything, okay? So if you don't have the 7-way, you're going to need one of those. And then you may still have the connector plug under the dash. So look under there, you might be surprised. If it's there, I would suggest checking for all the proper outputs. So you should have ground, you should have 12-volt power, and you should have a brake signal too, meaning whenever you push the brake pedal down, one of these smaller wires on that connector should have power. And then when you let go of the brake pedal, it shouldn't. So if your connector plug's there and it has that power and everything, then you would just need your 7-way and that custom connector that we talked about. The one that is more of a plug and play type deal. Now, if you don't have a 7-way and you don't have this factory connector up here, then you'd have to get quite a few more components. You would need to start out with a 4-way flat type trailer wiring, and then you would need to pick up the etrailer.com universal brake controller install kit. and that'll really get you started as far as getting everything set up. And if you happen to be set up that way, you'd want to make sure to get the brake controller that comes with the universal harness. That way you can hook it into the e-trailer install kit and get you going. So a few variations there. Like I said, the vast majority of you out there are going to have the factory 7-way and have this factory connector that's ready to go and everything. So that really makes installation a breeze. As far as getting this in, really nothing to it. You know, we pulled these panels down, they just unsnap, not a huge deal. Everything's pretty easy to get to. Mount up the brake controller and then decide where you want to put your switch. You know, create that opening, put it in there. That's really all there is to it. It's about as simple as it can get, especially for such a clean looking trailer brake controller. But you know, if this is something that you don't feel comfortable dealing with or just don't have the time, I understand that. You can always check out our dealer locator network, and hopefully that can get you going in the right direction as far as finding a shop that can set up for you. But if you're going to tackle this yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here in the front seat of our Ridgeline, and what we're going to do is remove this side panel and then this front panel. Now, you don't absolutely have to do this, but it is going to make things much easier to get to our connector plug and be able to mount up our knob and everything else. So to me, it's worthwhile spending a few minutes doing this, but we're going to do the side one first, and these just are snapped into place pretty much. So you can take a trim tool and just kind of work your way around it here. To get these snaps released. And usually once you get one or two, they all kind of seem to come out much easier. So that's kind of what was holding it in place there. And then we'll set that to the side. And the same is going to hold true for this panel as far as what I can tell so far. Work our way around, and you know, if it feels like we're getting hung up, I'll take a look under there and see what we need to do. I just came right off here. And I'm just going to unplug these connectors just so we can move our panel out of the way. Looks like we got a handful of them. With all of them, there's just a little tab in the center. You just push down on it and pull back on the plug. And all these have different style ends on them, so when we go to put it back together, it's pretty straightforward. So in our case, over here, we had something plugged into it, and to release it, you know, you can just kind of lightly pry up on these tabs. The whole dash section here is released, and we'll set it off to the side for now. With the dash out of the way, that gives us super easy access to the connector plug here. So tucked right up in here, this is a factory connector that we're going to be using to operate our brake controller. Since there's more or less two different versions available for this Redarc, I figured I'd touch base on both of them. What I would recommend doing is getting the brake controller that doesn't come with the universal harness and then picking up this custom fit harness separately. And that's exactly what we're going to do today, because what this will allow us to do, this end will match the Honda connector, so we can just plug right into that, and then this end will plug into our brake controller. But a lot of times, Honda and the Ridgelines will give you this universal harness, right? So this would plug in to the factory connector, and then you'll just have to make connections here. So if you happen to get the kit that comes with the brake controller and this universal harness, that'll still work. You'll just have to connect these together. And so if that's a setup that you're using, what these wires would go to, and these harnesses might be a little different, check the instructions or do what you need to do. But on ours, what we would do if you're setting it up this way is the factory black wire on our harness, that's going to be ground, and so that would get connected to the white wire from our Redarc harness. And I'll get them out of the way here. And then the blue wire here on the harness, it's a little bit darker blue, a little bit thicker wire, that's battery power on our factory harness. So you would connect that to the black wire from our Redarc harness. And then as far as this thin kind of sky blue, light blue factory wire, that's going to be our stoplight signal, brake signal. So you would connect that to the red wire from our Redarc harness. And then the factory brown wire, this would be the output to the trailer brakes, so you'd connect that to the thick blue wire from our Redarc harness. With all that said though, since we are going to be utilizing the custom fit harness, all we're going to have to do is plug that right in like so. We'll let that hang for a minute, and now we can find a spot to mount up the actual brake controller. So we'll be working underneath the dash somewhere. I'll pick out a spot and show you what I came up with. Here's what I came up with. Under the dash there's a bolt, a factory bolt that we can utilize to mount this, but I just wanted to show you the bracket that I'm using here. So it's just a 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch bracket. A lot of times you can just buy these from the hardware store. That's where this one came from. Or if you got a piece of metal at home, you can make your own. You can mount these in different orientations as well. You just want to make sure that it's actually going to be secured. You just don't want to zip tie this to a bundle of wire or something. So if you don't feel like bothering with that, if you can find another spot, that's awesome. But just wanted to show you what I had going on here before I put it under the dash. So I just secured it to the bracket. I got a couple of screws and flat washers and split lock washers to attach it. So now I'll get this installed under the dash there and show you how it turned out. Here's how I ended mounting this up. So right under the steering column, there's a little bracket holding on some wiring. And I just removed that bolt there. It's an 8mm head. Pulled the bolt out, slid our bracket on top of it, and tightened everything back down. I think it turned out pretty good. We can plug this end into the controller now. So it'll only go in one way. And whenever you're setting up wiring and everything, just make sure when you route it, you're not going to be around any moving parts. Make sure you clear your e-brake and your steering column and things of that nature. Now what we need to do is figure out where we want to mount up our switch and knob. So really you can put this in a ton of different spots, as long as you have the room, behind the dash and everything to have all this stuff mounted up. I'm choosing to go right here below our switches already. I think it'll be a good spot. Sometimes you'll have, depending on what options and stuff you have, sometimes one of these panels will be blank. You could always utilize one of those. I've done in the past. And Redarc actually has these universal mounting panels, and just kind of eyeballing it, it looks really close, like you might be able to use it. It's hard to say with 100% certainty if this will pop right in there, but that is always something you could potentially think about. But with that said, since we're going right to our dash, they give you this ring here, and I like to use it as a template. So I just, figure out where I want to mount it, color it in. You do want the nipple there to be up in the 12 o'clock position. And once we get this drilled, you don't absolutely have to install this into the dash. We may or may not. The dash is kind of thick, so we might have to do away with this, but at the very least, use it as a template, and then we can drill out the holes to the size listed in the instructions. With that hole drilled, I will say it's not uncommon to have to open it up just a little bit bigger. You could take your drill bit and kind of waller it out some. Tends to be the trend. And then a lot of times you have little burrs on the plastic. I'll come back with a razor blade and just kind of cut them clean. But we'll take our switch, line that up, and it looks like we can use this. So we'll push that into place. And then we have this nut that will thread on, and be careful when you're doing this. Make sure it's starting straight, because these are pretty easy to cross thread. So you definitely just want to start it by hand. Just make sure everything stays lined up while you're threading this in. Looking pretty good there. Then you can take a 12mm socket and just by hand again just tighten it up a little bit until it's snug. The knob, you want to turn that all the way counterclockwise as far as it'll go. Then you take the button here and you want to take where it says 0 and line that up with the nipple there that's pointing up. And then this just pushes into place. You can grab the other cable now, and on the back of the switch we can plug one of these ends in. You can use either one. I'm going to use this 90-degree one because just looking at the port on our brake controller that we have mounted under the dash, it makes more sense as far as routing to plug the straight end into that side. On this one, it's wide open, so it don't really matter here, but this will just plug right into place. We'll take our panel now, got all the electronics and everything plugged back in, and we'll just reinstall this the opposite way that we removed it. With the panels all re-secured, we only had one more wire left that we needed to plug in, and it was the other end of this wiring. And since it's kind of tricky to see under there, I happen to have another one of these on hand just so I can show you. But really simple, same exact way that we plugged into the back of the switch. We'll take that end, that just directly plugs into the brake controller. At this point, once everything's plugged in and everything, we're going to make sure everything's working and we can calibrate it, so on and so forth. And so you'd want to plug into your trailer. I'm just plugged into a test box, which simulates a trailer since we're inside here. And the brake controller lit up, has power. If yours does not, sometimes there will be a fuse that you have to put in the vehicle. Just check your owner's manual and look for anything related to trailer brake controller fuse. Check it, put the fuse in if it's missing. Ours works fine, so we don't have to worry about it. But we have a green light that flashes to blue, and that means the controller needs to be calibrated, which more or less it's really simple. You don't even have to be hooked up to your trailer, but you just drive like you normally would and come to complete stops, and after usually takes 6 or 10 stops, generally speaking, the light will go from that flashing color to a solid color. All right, and so when that happens, you know it's calibrated. Now with that said, if you're not hooked up to your trailer or anything, you're not going to see the light until you're plugged into it. So think about that. You know, if you're not hooked up, make more than enough stops and you should be in good shape there. So I'll go ahead, take this for a spin, get it calibrated, and then we can completely test it out. After driving it around for a minute, our light went to solid blue, letting us know that the trailer brake controller is calibrated and ready to be used. So with that done, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Redarc TowPro Liberty trailer brake controller on our 2022 Honda Ridgeline.